Right now, 4 spacecraft are drifting silently out of our solar system. Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, and Pioneer 11, humanity's fastest, farthest-flung machines, launched decades ago, still traveling outward at roughly 17 kilometers per second. Here's the number that should stop you cold. At that speed, Voyager 1, the fastest of the 4, would take over 73,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor. Not the nearest galaxy, not even close to it. The nearest star, and Voyager 1 isn't even heading toward it. It's not aimed at any star in particular. It's just falling outward, forever, into the dark. So here's the real question we need to ask tonight. Not, can we reach the stars someday? But something much more specific, much more haunting. Can we reach the one star closest to us, practically our cosmic next-door neighbor, at all? And if we can, will it actually still be us who arrives? Because the answer to that question turns out to be deeply, quietly unsettling. And it has almost nothing to do with rockets not being powerful enough. Let's start with exactly what we're up against, because the scale here is almost designed to break human intuition. Proxima Centauri sits about 4.24 light-years from Earth. That means light itself, the fastest thing that exists, capable of circling the entire Earth 7.5 times in a single second, still takes over 4 years to make that trip one way. In kilometers, we're talking about roughly 40 trillion of them. If you tried to drive there in a car at highway speed, without ever stopping, it would take you about 45 million years. Now, humanity has gotten remarkably good at crossing our own solar system. We've landed rovers on Mars, we've flown a probe past Pluto and photographed its heart-shaped glacier in stunning detail. We even flew a spacecraft directly into the sun's outer atmosphere. These are genuine, staggering achievements, and fast enough to matter on an interstellar scale. Our fastest spacecraft ever built, the Parker Solar Probe, has reached speeds of around 190 kilometers per second by diving close to the sun and using its gravity as a slingshot. That's genuinely astonishing, and it would still take that probe roughly 6,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. 6,000 years. For context, that's longer than the entire span of recorded human civilization. We'd need to launch a spacecraft today that wouldn't arrive until long after every language currently spoken on Earth has likely changed beyond recognition, or vanished completely. That's not a technical delay. That's a different category of problem entirely. So scientists have proposed something radically different, something that doesn't rely on chemical rockets or gravity slingshots at all. It's called Breakthrough Starshot, a real, seriously funded research initiative, and its concept sounds like science fiction until you realize actual physicists are working on it right now. The idea, instead of building one big heavy spacecraft, build thousands of tiny ones, probes small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, attached to ultra-thin, ultra-reflective sails only meters wide. Then, from Earth, fire a massive array of ground-based lasers at those sails, pushing them with focused light pressure, accelerating them not for minutes, but continuously until they reach a genuinely staggering fraction of the speed of light, potentially over 20%. At that speed, the journey to Proxima Centauri would take around 20 years instead of thousands. Suddenly, within a single human lifetime, we could have real data from another star system. It sounds like the answer. It sounds like the loophole we've been looking for. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because getting a tiny probe up to relativistic speed isn't actually the hardest part of this plan. Surviving the journey is? Think about what 20% the speed of light actually means for a physical object moving through space. At that velocity, even a single grain of interstellar dust, something smaller than a grain of sand, essentially weightless, the kind of particle that drifts harmlessly through space for eternity, becomes a devastating projectile. The energy of an impact scales with the square of velocity, which means a collision at relativistic speed can release energy comparable to a small explosive charge. A spacecraft moving that fast doesn't need to hit an asteroid to be destroyed. It just needs to hit dust. And the interstellar medium, the thin, wispy scattering of gas and dust that fills the space between stars, isn't empty. It's sparse, but it's not nothing. Over a 20-year journey spanning trillions of kilometers, the statistical odds of encountering enough of these microscopic hazards to cripple or destroy a paper-thin probe become a serious engineering nightmare that researchers are still trying to solve. Some proposed solutions involve shielding, redundancy, sending thousands of probes assuming a fraction will survive, but none of this is solved yet. It remains one of the most significant open problems in the entire project. So even our most promising near-term plan for reaching the nearest star is, in a very real sense, a numbers game against an ocean of nearly invisible bullets. And that's before we even talk about slowing down. Here's something most people don't consider when they imagine interstellar travel. Getting there is only half the problem. If Breakthrough Starshot's tiny probes are moving at 20% the speed of light with no way to decelerate, they don't gently arrive at Proxima Centauri. They scream through the entire system in a matter of hours, capturing what data they can during that razor-thin window, then continue on forever into deep space, never able to stop, never able to orbit, never able to send back more than a single fleeting glimpse. Imagine training your entire life for a marathon, only to be told you'll be sprinting past the finish line so fast that you get roughly one photograph of the crowd before you're gone forever, unable to ever come back. That's the current best-case scenario for humanity's most advanced plan to reach the nearest star. A flyby, a glimpse, not a visit. And that's only for a probe the size of a smartphone. Now, let's talk about what happens when you try to scale this up to something carrying actual human beings. Because that's where the story stops, being a technical challenge, and starts becoming something closer to a philosophical crisis. If lasers and light sails could somehow be scaled up to carry a human crew, we'd immediately run into the walls we've touched before. The energy requirements climb toward the impossible, and even a modest fraction of light speed introduces meaningful time dilation, the well-documented relativistic effect, where time itself passes slower for those moving at extreme velocity relative to the people who stayed behind. But let's set that aside for a moment, because there's an even more practical proposal that avoids needing exotic near-light speeds altogether. The generation ship. The concept is simple to describe and staggeringly difficult to execute. Build a massive, self-sustaining vessel. Fill it with a crew large enough to maintain a stable, genetically healthy population. Launch it toward Proxima Centauri at speeds achievable with advanced but plausible propulsion, say 1 or 2% of light speed. Except that the original crew will live their entire lives, grow old, and die aboard that ship. Their children will be born in transit, their grandchildren too, and it will be some distant descendant, generations removed from the people who first said goodbye to Earth, who finally steps off the ship and sees an alien sky for the first time. At 1%, the speed of light itself, a wildly optimistic assumption given current propulsion technology, the journey to Proxima Centauri would take roughly 400 years. That's somewhere between 12 and 20 human generations, depending on how you count them, living their entire existence inside a metal vessel, with no ability to step outside, no fresh planetary environment, no true horizon. Here's the deeply unsettling part, and it isn't really about the physics at all. It's about what 4 centuries of enclosed, isolated human life would actually do to the people inside that ship. Every closed society in human history that has faced extreme isolation, from small research stations in Antarctica to submarine crews on extended deployments, has documented real, measurable psychological strain, relationship breakdowns, morale collapse, and the mental toll of confinement, even over spans of months, not centuries. Multiply that isolation by 400 years, and you're not just asking people to endure hardship. You're asking an entire evolving society, with all its politics, disagreements, and generational conflicts, to remain functional, cooperative, and genetically viable for longer than most nations in human history have managed to survive intact without collapse, revolution, or war. Some researchers who study this seriously, and this remains a topic of genuine, active academic debate rather than settled fact, have raised the concern that a multi-generational voyage could face a subtler danger than any external threat, internal social or cultural collapse. Imagine a society where, after 5 or 6 generations, the descendants no longer feel connected to the original mission at all, where Earth becomes an abstract myth rather than a memory, where the reason for the entire journey has to be preserved, generation after generation, purely through culture, education, and willpower, with no way to check back with home, no way to course correct if something goes wrong. And even if the ship holds together mechanically, and the society inside holds together socially, there's one more layer to this that rarely gets discussed. The people who eventually arrive at Proxima Centauri will never have known Earth. They'll be born in space, raised in space, and will have spent their entire lives in an artificial environment their ancestors built. In a very real sense, the humans who leave Earth and the humans who arrive at the destination might be, culturally and psychologically, almost unrecognizable to one another. We often imagine interstellar travel as us reaching the stars, but the more honestly you examine a generation ship, the more it looks like something stranger. Not us reaching another star, but an entirely new lineage of humanity being created for the sole purpose of finishing a journey we started and will never see completed. That's the quietly haunting truth sitting underneath all the engineering diagrams and thruster designs. Reaching the nearest star might not really be about us at all. Let's pull back for a second, because there's a scientific twist buried inside all of this that makes the entire mission even more uncertain, and it involves the destination itself. Proxima Centauri isn't just any star. It's a red dwarf, smaller and dimmer than our Sun, and it hosts at least one known planet in its habitable zone called Proxima Centauri b, discovered in 2016. When that news broke, it ignited genuine excitement across the scientific community, a potentially rocky Earth-sized world, orbiting the very star we might one day actually be able to reach. But red dwarf stars come with a serious complication. They're prone to violent, unpredictable flares, sudden, intense bursts of radiation far more extreme, relative to their size, than anything our own Sun produces. Proxima Centauri itself has been observed unleashing flares dramatically brighter than its usual output, capable of blasting a nearby planet with radiation levels that could strip away atmosphere over time and make the surface far less hospitable than early excitement suggested. So even in the best-case scenario, where humanity somehow solves propulsion, survives the journey, and manages to hold a civilization together across centuries of transit, the destination itself might not be the paradise we're imagining. It might be a harsh, radiation-scoured world orbiting a temperamental star, offering little more than the grim satisfaction of having technically arrived. Every layer we peel back on this mystery reveals another layer underneath it, and none of them are simple. So let's bring this all together, because when you stack these problems on top of each other, the unsettling answer starts to come into focus, and it's not the answer most people expect. It's tempting to assume the reason we may never reach the nearest star is simply that our engines aren't powerful enough yet, and that someday, with better technology, the problem resolves itself. But the deeper truth is stranger than that. Even our most ambitious, real, currently funded proposal Breakthrough Starshot doesn't solve the problem of arriving. It solves the problem of getting there fast, at the cost of never being able to stop, explore, or return. And the alternative, the generation ship, doesn't really solve the problem of reaching the star with us at all. It solves it by creating new generations of humans, born and raised entirely in transit, who inherit a mission they never chose and complete a journey their ancestors could never live to see. In other words, the unsettling truth isn't that the nearest star is unreachable. It's that reaching it in any way currently imaginable requires giving something up that feels essential to what we mean by we. Either the mission arrives without a crew at all, a fleeting, fragile probe, gone in hours, vulnerable to dust, or it arrives with people who are, culturally and biologically, several human lifetimes removed from the ones who set out. There may be no version of this journey where the people who leave Earth are the same people who arrive somewhere else. And maybe that's the real reason this question feels so haunting. It's not really about distance, or fuel, or velocity. It's about identity, and time, and what gets lost, quietly and irreversibly, when you ask a civilization to reach across a gap this vast. But here's where the story doesn't have to end in despair. Every one of the obstacles we've discussed tonight is a problem as understood with today's science, today's materials, and today's assumptions about propulsion and biology. A century ago, the idea of a machine crossing interstellar dust at 20% the speed of light wouldn't have been science fiction, it would have been considered nonsense. Full stop. We didn't have lasers. We didn't have the materials science to build sails a few atoms thick. We didn't even have a confirmed planet orbiting Proxima Centauri to aim for. Now we have all three. And serious scientists, backed by serious funding, are actively working through the remaining problems, one stubborn technical hurdle at a time. So here's the truth we're left with tonight. We may never reach the nearest star the way we've always imagined it, a crew stepping onto a new world, still recognizably themselves, still carrying Earth's memory intact. But we may still reach it, just not as a single, unbroken us. Maybe it will be a swarm of paper-thin probes, gone in an instant, sending back a single fleeting photograph of an alien sky before vanishing forever into the dark beyond. Or maybe it will be the great-great-great-grandchildren of people who are, right now, alive on Earth, today men and women who will spend their entire lives finishing a journey they were born into, arriving at a star their ancestors could only dream about, carrying nothing of Earth with them, except the story of why they were sent. Either way, something of us will get there. Just not perhaps the us we imagined when we first looked up at Proxima Centauri and wondered what it would take to say hello.